Good evening. Welcome to the planning meeting on Wednesday the 25th of October. I move to apologies for absence. There are two. Councillor Field and Councillor Shona are not here, and we have Councillor Brown and Councillor Mayton substituting. Any other absences? Excellent. Record of the previous meeting. There's a supplementary agenda advice, and on the one in St Mary's Island and the one in Hempstead, we agreed conditions. Well, one was for refusal and one's for additional conditions, the normal way after the meeting, and they are laid out on the supplementary agenda. So. Next, urgent matters. I'm not aware of any urgent matters. 4, declarations of interest. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. I attend both parish councils for Wainscott and Cliff Woods. I make it very clear during that meeting I'm on this planning committee, and therefore I ask for dispensation to leave the meeting when any planning matters take place, and that is always done. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. So we're all here, and we go to item 5, which is land west of Station Road in Gillingham North, and Chris Hawkins is going to do the presentation.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. This application seeks reserve matters approval for 75 dwellings on a site in Station Road, Rainham. The principle of development has already been accepted through the granting of the outline consent some 3 years ago. You can see on the screens here the site location. What this doesn't show is the Bellway site to the west of this development site that's now being built out and has pretty much been completed. You can see there a photograph of the site. The Bakersfield development, which is a relatively contemporary scheme, sits on the eastern side of Station Road, and you can see that just at the bottom of the screen there. There's some photographs of that particular scheme that we're talking about. Looking there, photographs of the field, you'll see a part established hedgerow that sits along Station Road with a large tree which is to the north of the site, falls just outside of the site boundary. So for your consideration this evening is the appearance, layout, landscaping and scale of the development that's proposed. As I say, the principle of development for up to 76 units together with the access was agreed previously as part of the outline consent. So, in terms of appearance, members will see from the plans here, the properties within the application site are of a relatively traditional form, although the applicant has sought to respond to the more contemporary Bakersfield development within the design of the properties along Station Road, and we've got some elevations of those here. You can see those. Within the site, this is the general theme of the properties themselves. These would be mostly constructed of bricks, with some detailing, including the provision of brick plinths, and through negotiations with the applicant, we've sought to ensure that all flank walls that front onto public open spaces or onto highways are articulated with fenestration and detailing as well. So in terms of the design of the buildings, I think they sit quite comfortably within the surrounds. They respond positively to the development on the eastern side, as well as perhaps the more traditional development on the western side of the site. And obviously, as one moves southwards towards Rainham town centre as well. The next matter is siting and layout, and I'll put this up on the screen now. The layout is fairly regular in its form, i.e. it's right-angled turns in the road, but this is near identical to the layout that was put before members at an outline stage, and that members at that stage considered to be acceptable. Hence the overall number is very similar to that's previously been approved. When you move towards Rainham town centre itself, you'll see a very similar pattern of development that established through the 1960s, 1970s development, which adjoins this, and obviously to the more traditional terrace streets that you get as you move up towards the station. So, to my mind, this layout that's shown here, albeit very rectilinear, very formal, I certainly don't raise any objections to it. I think it sits very comfortably within its surrounds. So, to my mind, I think that as well is acceptable. What you will see is, through negotiations, we've tried to ensure that the road hierarchy is clearly identified through different surface materials, so that there's areas of shared surface for pedestrian vehicles, etc. Just to break down that regularity, I guess, in terms of the layout. And to that end, I'll move to landscaping, which is one of the other matters for consideration. The applicant has submitted a relatively detailed landscaping plan as part of this, including tree species. You'll see within the committee report that we are in general agreement with the species that are proposed, but I think there are some potential changes that could see the inclusion of more indigenous species in part, and I think that could be dealt with by condition, just to ensure that we have something that perhaps sits more favourably within the site. But importantly, for me, that includes quite a bit of tree planting, and it's getting that vertical emphasis through the development, because I think you'll see that the way the scheme's been laid out, including that vertical emphasis as one moves through the streets, will help break up some of the car parking areas and some of the formality of the streets itself. So, subject to those potential changes in species, again, I think the landscaping within the scheme is acceptable. Moving on finally to scale, as you'll see, the buildings are all 2-storey in height. There's a good mix within this development of terraced, semi-detached and detached properties, perhaps a greater mix than one gets to see in a number of developments of this type. So I think from my perspective, the scale of the buildings here very much responds to what you'd expect to see in the locality. So again, that in itself is acceptable. In terms of the development itself, it aligns with the requirements of the outline consent insofar as it delivers 25% affordable housing. Obviously, the contributions that were obtained at outline stage would come forward should this development happen. It sits within the parameters that were formally agreed. So, to my mind, there are no grounds to object to the proposal, and that is why we have recommended approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. Members who were here a few years back will know that I posed this proposal then, said it was an overdevelopment. Unfortunately, I lost out in my argument. However, continuing on through the report that we have in front of us now, I notice a number of comments are made regarding the scale and density, the constraints that there are, and even more importantly, the parking issues on some of these things. Now, obviously, there's nothing I can do about any of that now. However, I would like to request, if possible, that the permitted development rights for this site is removed, simply because the scale of the buildings that are there now, the way they've been shoehorned in, and if anybody wants to make any changes whatsoever to those properties, it needs to come before planning. So that's what I'm requesting of this committee tonight. Thank you.
Go to Howcroft Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's really improved and it looks really aesthetically pleasing. I'm delighted the 25% social housing. Just one or two niggles for me. Obviously, representations, they were questioning the ecological value has not been taken into account. I think you have addressed that, but and I do think that the how can I say, aesthetically with lots of greenery will also have a different kind of impact. But I just wondered if there was any provision, and it links to, you know, the parking really for bikes, safe bike storage, and also just because there's a large part of it south-facing, but actually for all the houses, could we not consider some solar panelling? Thank you.
So you don't even remember to talk about permitted development rights at all? Or Tris, yeah. I'll set the two members' questions.
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, thank you for your questions. In terms of the removal of permitted development rights, my view would be that generally speaking, permitted development rights are removed because there's a concern about the impact on residential amenity once a scheme is... Do you want me to speak up a bit? Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Permitted development rights are generally removed when there's a concern on residential amenity once the buildings have been constructed and thereafter used. I think it would be very difficult to argue, for example, that permitted development rights should be removed from the buildings that sit within the centre of the site. However, if members are particularly concerned about the relationship, for example, of the buildings that sit along the southern boundary of the site, and you know, if they were extended backwards towards the existing properties, that that could be something that raises concern. It might be that you want to look specifically at the buildings to remove those rights from, rather than just do it carte blanche across the whole site. I think that would potentially be a bit more pragmatic solution, shall we say, and should ensure, hopefully, that the intentions of making sure that the residential amenity of existing residences is protected. And I'd certainly be happy to look at that post this committee and draft something accordingly if that's helpful to you. In terms of the representations of ecological value, I can confirm all of the necessary reports have been submitted as part of a discharge of conditions application that runs alongside here. And whilst I do understand residents' concern, I think it's, like I say, that has been dealt with in terms of the statutory requirements, so there's no concerns from our perspective there. In terms of the provision of PV cells, that hasn't been requested at this stage. I'll be guided by perhaps Mr. Harris as to whether it would be appropriate to go back to the applicants to ask for that, but I would say if we did, it would certainly be on the premise that we'd be seeking delegated powers to approve whilst asking that question. I don't know if you wanted to come back on that, Mr. Harris.
Chairman, thank you. on that, what we could do, Councillor Howcroft Scott, is, I mean, they've got to comply with building regulations anyway, the new building regulations in relation to energy efficiency. They've put forward on page 30 a number of things that they are doing, which includes that and more. We can ask them if they want to do put on solar panels and push them on that. And if members are happy with delegating that to me to negotiate and Mr. Hawkins, we can try and negotiate that.
I would really appreciate that. I know I'm really lucky. My house was built in 1908, but I have 25 solar panels on it, and it really does make an impact for heating and fuel, and I have numerous foster children and whatever. and also I earn a little bit of an income, and I just think it's such a waste to have such a, you know, something that's ready for the 21st century, and it's a missed opportunity myself.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. There are a few amenity green spaces, which is good. There's also quite a number of family homes, but I noticed there's no playground for children who will be moving into those homes. So that's my question. Could we get a playground fitted into the site plan? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. The outline consent didn't require for a playground to be provided on the site. And on that basis, I think it would be very difficult for us to argue for it. I think it's also important to consider the sort of the trade-off, if you like, between ecological enhancements within an application site and the loss that would occur should that playground be provided. From memory, when I visited the site, the Bakersfield site that sits directly opposite does have a playground centrally within it, which is actually only a short walk from this development itself. So I would be confident that any families living there would have they would have availability of a play space, you know, within a very short walk from where they'd be residing, should they move into these properties. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you, Chris, for that. In addition to that, Councillor Pearce, can I borrow the mouse? Chris, thank you very much. What we have done with the Medway development, which is to the west there, and this development in here, is to provide that link through, not only through for the vehicles going through here, but also in relation to the open space. So that open space flows through into the open space in here, and that is a children's play area just in there. So it will serve the Medway scheme and this scheme as well. And as Chris said, you go across the road and literally at the bottom there's another play area. So there's two play areas in very close proximity. Thank you.
Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the very good presentation. I see very little problem with this development. I think a lot of effort's being put in to make it look attractive. I must admit I like the mix of housing designs, particularly having a more contemporary style at the southern end of the site, which faces the more contemporary buildings on the other side of the road. I think it's good that we're moving away from sort of estates that basically are just boring and look like could be plonked down anywhere. So I've got no problems with it as a development. I've just got a couple of little comments to make. On the landscaping, I noticed, interestingly, the officer mentioned it, that there was a suggestion that Corylus calerna, commonly known as hazel, wouldn't be suitable as it's not a native species. I think you're correct. I looked in my tree book and it comes from Turkey. But could I suggest Corylus maxima? The same genetic type of tree, but its common name is Kentish cobnut or filbert. So that certainly is a very local, because the Tilia cordata, or small-leaf lime, again looking at my tree book earlier today, can grow up to 20 or 25 metres high. Although it says in the book it would be small, relatively compact, I don't think 20 to 25 metres is relatively compact, unless my book's got the height of the tree wrong. I think it would be better to go for the hazel type ones, which are far more compact. The other thing that I was a little bit interested to see further on is the comments from Southern Water further down on page 31. That quite intrigued me, where they were saying it is not desirable to have permeable paving over a sewer. Now, given the fact over the last few weeks we've had, well, and even the last few days, extraordinarily high levels of rainfall, the need for, sustainable urban drainage and permeable paving is more than ever. So I find it rather ironic that Southern Water, who've not got a good reputation for dealing with wastewater in the first place, are putting objections to actually solving some of the problems by having a more permeable paving. So not relevant to this planning application, but certainly, Mr Harris, it would be interesting if we could have some more information on this, because certainly I would like to see us as a committee having a real emphasis on making sure that there is sufficient drainage capacity within new developments, so none of the surplus rainfall leaves the site, because if it does, it has consequences of flooding. I mean, in my own ward, up Mackenzie Road, which is one of the highest points in Medway, it regularly floods, which, you know, is totally ridiculous. And the reason it floods is because so many people have paved over their front gardens, the water has got nowhere to go except out into the street and then into some poor person's living room. So I think that's an area I'd certainly want us as a committee to take a bit more interest in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Wish to comment, Mr Hawkins?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the tree species, I'm more than happy to amend any species to as you suggested. I think that's a very sensible approach. In terms of the drainage and the sewers, as I understand it, the comment relates to permeable drainage directly above an existing sewer, rather than the premise of sustainable or drainage in itself. And my assumption is, and it is an assumption and no more, is that obviously with the rain permeating into the ground, if there is a sewer underneath, what they don't want is for that to be unsettled in any way through the movement of earth, etc. So I think they're just very careful on that. But what I would say is I think in this instance, it's likely that the sewer would be diverted, so the provision of permeable paving here would be acceptable. Thank you.
Councillor Jones?
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to speak about the comments by Kent Police, but before I do, Councillor Etheridge made a point earlier about permitted development and the officer kindly agreed to draft something. I assume that'll be cleared in the normal way through the Chair, Vice Chair and spokespersons. Thank you. I noticed on this report that we did have some comments from Kent Police. I've been asking at committee meetings about how frequently we consult the police on developments and in what circumstances. What I'd wrongly assumed on my first reading of the report was that these were in the conditions, but having read the report again, I can't find them in the conditions. The Kent Police made certain comments about the design guide and incorporating them into the conditions, and the report says if conditioned, but I can't actually find that they have been. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. With regards to Kent Police's comments, obviously they've asked for a condition to be attached which relates to secure by design and the 2019 guidance. I think the difficulty we've got here is that with this being a detailed reserved matters application, if that then resulted, if they were to adhere to that guidance strictly, if that were to then result in changes to the design of the buildings, etc., then obviously they would require either a non-material amendment or a Section 73 application to subsequently follow. My view would be that in this instance, the applicant has tried to adhere to the principles of secure by design through the development itself. And when I say that, that means that all roads are being fronted onto. There isn't any what I would call dead space that you would sort of anticipate antisocial behaviour taking place. What we could do is place an informative on the decision, though, which says that they should re-look at the secure by design and try to bring in as many of those features as possible that don't require amendments to the physicality of the scheme, to the appearance of the scheme. And I think that perhaps is a sensible approach to deal with that issue.
I personally would be satisfied with that, Chair, assuming the Vice Chair and colleagues are content with that.
No problem. Okay, so Councillor Lemus.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a really good scheme. Having looked on Google Maps, it almost seems like it's the road seems unfinished without development there, so it makes perfect sense. I think the scheme's almost perfect. I'd just like to ask, where it has on the climate change and energy efficiency section on page 30, provision for EV charging points, does that mean they're going to put in EV charging points from the onset, or just provide for it, so if someone does it in the future, it can be done? Because I think similarly with the point by my friend Councillor Howcroft-Scott, it would be an opportunity missed. But I'm really supportive of the scheme. Thank you.
Mr Hawkins?
Thank you, Chair. The intention is effectively to put the ducting in and the ability to make future connections, not to necessarily provide a service point for each particular unit. But what we've asked for is that there is the ability to effectively, all of the ducting is put into place so that in the future, should people have an electric car, effectively it's very easy to install at that point in time. But the installation of a physical charging point isn't made at this stage.
Okay. Councillor Hamadeshi?
Thank you. And I too support the application. It's very thorough and it will certainly enhance the area. I know that road very, very well, and you just drive past it thinking, why can't you build on it? My point is, or my question is related to this 25% of affordable dwellings. And how do you plan to distribute that in the spirit of social cohesion and ensuring that people that are going to be using that 25% portion still have the ability to choose the right sort of dwelling that fits their needs, and they're not shoehorned into a corner of the development?
Mr Hawkins?
Thank you. You'll see within the report that the affordable housing element is brought together into one area of the development. And the reason for that is because it's a relatively small application, should we say, that small insofar as it requires affordable housing. If they are pepper potted around too much within the scheme, it becomes very difficult for a registered social landlord to manage those properties. Because obviously they're sort of scattered around the development. So whilst ordinarily you would seek to break up the affordable housing element into 1, 2, into 2, 3 or 4 perhaps areas, that hasn't happened in this instance. But because of the numbers that we're talking about, we felt comfortable that was an appropriate approach. What you will see hopefully from the layout is that the scheme itself is tenure blind, i.e. there's no difference between any affordable houses on here than those that would be for sale for private sale or for private rent thereafter. And that's an intentional, we've pushed the developer to ensure that is the case, because as many people have said this evening, I think actually this scheme's got quite a good mix of different family homes on here in terms of sizes, and we wanted to ensure that there was a blindness to the tenure. So yes, there will be an area that will be allocated for affordable housing. It will provide a breadth of different types of affordable housing, 2 and 3 bedroom units, but they are all located together. But like I say, it's not an area that you'd easily identify as being set aside for affordable provision, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure, and just to respond back to that, as you see with new developments, everything is fair and dandy, but over the years to come, 10, 15 years time, that area which is only allocated for affordable housing can tend to be the bleak spot. So just be mindful of that, and at every opportunity we've got to think about equity and ensuring that, yes, I do welcome that it's a blindsided type approach, which is excellent. It's just that they're being shoehorned to one particular part of the development, and over time that might lead to dysfunction and less social cohesion in the area.
Chairman, just coming back, and I understand completely the point that the Councillor Hammadish is making. What I would just add to Chris's comment is, one, in terms of the size of the property and meeting the needs, that's been done in negotiation with our housing team to meet the specific needs for affordable homes in that area. Absolutely, Chris is right in terms of that 10-year blind, same materials and so on. And then your point, Councillor Hammadish, is it's about the maintenance of the landscape and the maintenance of those public areas. And that, my experience in modern developments is that's done very, very well. Certainly where I live, I could take you around that and you would be hard pushed to spot the affordable homes there, because the maintenance is no different from the private areas.
Thank you for that.
Okay. So, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for my tardiness earlier. I'd like to compliment the officers and the developer on this site, because actually we're talking about affordable homes on the site, not being off-site, like we've seen in other areas where people have been arguing quite rightly that we should have our affordable housing, but it should be on the sites. And I would actually compliment everybody who's worked hard for this to be that way. And I accept the point, dealing with a lot of registered providers, that we need to keep the management of some of these affordable housing condensed. I deal a lot, you probably recognise that I actually have the largest council estate in the borough as my ward, and I'm proud to represent it. But it does present challenges for Medway Council if we have pepper potted any of the houses. So I can understand why there would be a concern for it not to be not looked after. But from everything that's happened so far, it is very hopeful that this is going to be a really nice site with good social cohesion on it. There's playground provision. It's not a huge site. The developer seems to have worked with the council officers, and I'd be definitely very, very happy to see this come forward as quick as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'll be supporting the recommendation. Just a quick comment. I usually talk about bat boxes and bird boxes, and that's covered quite well with condition 5. So the details of the quantity and where they're going to be located will be coming to officers in due course. So I'm happy with that. Thank you very much.
Okay, before I go to the Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. I have slight concerns about the houses that front the station road, where there would be necessity to sort of reverse onto the road, which is stated in the details. But the sort of mitigation against it is that the estate opposite, Bakersfield, at the time, because they've got a sort of turning arrangement where they can turn round and come out frontwards, but the sort of reasoning is that it's now a 20 mile an hour speed limit in that area as opposed to 30, but whether it's 20, 30 or 40, drivers will drive at a pace that suits them, not what's on the round or on the sign. So I feel that it would be more appropriate if they had a turning area the same as the or similar to the Bakersfield site, because the difference in the speed limit on the sign makes no difference to the speed the drivers are driving at. Thank you.
Councillor, Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you. And this is a point actually that was raised as part of the first iteration of the scheme by officers in terms of whether it's suitable for cars to reverse out onto that particular road. What you will see, perhaps rather vaguely on the screen, is that it is proposed that there's a raised table to be provided at the point of access, which would act as a traffic calming measure. And I've been to the site probably 2 or 3 times now, so it's a fairly straight road, and I do notice that people do perhaps not always stick to 20 miles an hour along there. But what we've had to do is to take a balanced approach, and I suppose that's the same with any planning application. And the view that we took was that the risk to highway was minimal, but actually that the importance of having frontage development along there, i.e. properties that come onto that road in in terms of design was very important, because when you look at the development to the south as you head towards Rainham, and actually perhaps more importantly the more linear development as you head northwards, to not have that type of development there I think would have looked slightly incongruous. So it was a balance for us in that regard, and I certainly understand the concerns that you're raising, but we felt that with the good visibility that we have, the traffic calming that's proposed, and the fact that we felt that the design approach that was taken was the most appropriate, on balance it would be acceptable. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go to the Vice Chair in a second. Just to remind people that on the agenda tonight we have 4 applications. There are 2 for approval, 2 for refusal, and so when the Vice Chair moves the recommendation, when I ask for those supporting the proposal, it's either refusal or approval, depending on what it says on the papers. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, are we adding in a condition with regards to the Kent Police's comment, and was there something about the permitted development rights, taking that away from some of the plots, and looking at the trees? Is that correct?
Chairman, my notes are, you're very, very close, Councillor. Yes, condition regarding permitted development rights, which Chris will draft. We will negotiate on solar panels, and there may be a further condition on that, depending on what comes out through those negotiations. An informative regarding secure by design, and an informative regarding the tree changes.
Thank you. I move the recommendation to approve the application subject to the conditions 1 to 7 in the main papers, and then looking at adding in a condition with regards to the Kent Police's comment in the main papers, and informative for the solar panels and trees.
Thank you.
I'll second that, Chair.
Those in favour of the proposal as moved?
That's 16, Chairman.
Thank you. So the application for land west of Station Road, Rainham, has been approved. And can I thank Mr. Hawkins for coming? I'm sure he doesn't want to stay for the rest of it. So let's move on to item 6. Mr. Harris will present the Cityway, well, it's the Delsway application, really. And Councillor Murray will speak as ward member after Mr. Harris has presented.
Chairman, thank you very much. Members, what I'm going to do here is talk you through a little bit of the history behind this. The previous scheme, which was recommended by officers, this committee had a site visit. I know it wasn't the members that are here, but they had a site visit. They overturned the officer's recommendation at that stage. It went to appeal and was dismissed in appeal. And I'll talk you through the reasons why the inspector dismissed the appeal. And then we can see how the applicant has tried to address those concerns of the inspector. But hopefully in doing so, I'll explain why we still don't feel that the inspector's concerns have been satisfactorily addressed, which is why we're recommending refusal, and the 3 reasons for that. So this is the application site that you see here, outlined in red, off on the Dels, and you've got Cityway coming down here. It's the back of that property there. And that's the frontage onto the Dels. So not the most attractive frontage onto the Dels at the moment, with the advert boards, and then you've got the nice tree screen behind it. And then you can see that lay-by just in the front here, and another lay-by on the opposite side of the road as well. So within the site, so you're looking, if you see the little arrow just in there, so you're looking down towards this wall, so along this wall and along there. Now that wall is the wall that's referred to in the officer's report of historic value, and the KCC archaeological officer is saying that it's almost, or may be, of schedulable quality in terms of its value. And that wall forms part of the Dels Tower, which if I go back to the site plan here, the Dels Tower was around this area just in here, and was part of the fortifications, historic fortifications of the area. And then you had a wall, I can get the mouse to work, a wall that went along here, which was part of those fortifications linked to the tower. Now, nothing or very little exists of the tower now, but a lot other than underground. But the wall is important to that historical value. And then you can see it wrapping around the site here, and then looking back along that area here, back towards that wall. And then here we're looking back towards the Dells. Those are the properties opposite the Dells. That's where the hoardings are, just along there. So it's a pretty overgrown site, but it's as you can see from its configuration there, it's quite difficult to develop. It's a difficult site, and the applicants have tried. They have tried. Undoubtedly, they've tried to see what they can best achieve on the site. So this is the scheme that was previously considered by this committee, was refused by this committee, and went to appeal. So as you'll see on page 37, this was an application for 7 flats and was effectively in 2 blocks. 1 block here, 1 block there with an amenity area and refuse area just in the middle there. And then you can see that distance to that historic wall through there. Now, at the time of the application, I don't think we appreciated, or we didn't appreciate fully, the importance, the historical importance of that wall. And then you can see how the layout of the site. So if I can get the mouse to work, which it's not, you can start to see you've got flat 1 here. You've got around about 1.1 metres, 1.2 metres there at the back. Flat 1, which was a 1-bedroom unit. Flat 2 in here, so the access coming in there, serving flat 1. Flat 2, cycle rack at the back here. Flat 3 just in here. With access from there. That central amenity space, and then you just had these windows serving the flats at the back, within a metre or so, 1.2 metres of the wall, and then we had a retail space on this block here. Then if we go above that, we had further flats, 3 flats there, and then a 7th flat above the retail. And then these were the elevations onto the Dell. So you see it was a 2-storey scheme. It was moved along. It was tried to get the difference in height, difference in materials to try and get that articulation and interest on the street scene. And this fence in here providing the privacy to the amenity area. But you can see 18 City Way above it, and you can see how it relates to the adjacent properties just in there. Now, the inspector considered that appeal, and he dismissed it. So he agreed with members' rationale, and he dismissed it, and this is covered on page 38. The proposed buildings would appear unacceptably, these buildings here would appear unacceptably dominant and cramped on the site due to the extent of their footprints and mass relative to the shallow site depth. He also concluded that the proposal would not make adequate provision for on-site amenity space. Now remember, you've got that central amenity area in there. Otherwise, you've just got a very limited amenity to the back of the properties themselves. And then the third concern he had was that it would place additional pressures on local parking facilities. So as I said, the applicants have tried to address those concerns. They've come up with a scheme for more units, 8 units in this case. And they are, in terms of the size of them, they're set out on page 36. So you've got 8 flats, 5 of which will be 1-bedroom, 3 would be 2-bedroom. But they're proposing now, in terms of getting that number in, a Part 2 and Part 3-storey development. So our concern is, well, that's actually increasing the height and its impact on the Dells, and therefore, in our view, not properly addressing the inspector's concerns about that dominant and cramped on the site. And if I start to go through the floor plans, You can see here you've got an access there from the Dels to the 2-bedroom flat in there, then a central access there to a cycleway, an entrance to the flats above, a further flat just in here, and then quite a contrived flat just in this area here. Trying to get some private amenity area spaces to the front in here. That flat here, flat 1, would have some amenity at the back. And what the applicants have tried to do is to try and pull it away from the wall to try and give some protection to the wall there. So they're trying. And that would be the amenity area for that ground floor flat. Then in relation to flats 2 and 3, flat 2 here, the amenity there would go along the back of flat 3 and along to an amenity area to the rear of to the far side of the flat just in there. So a pretty contrived amenity area. Flat 3 would have this area just in here. And then above that, you would have a further 2-bedroom flat in there, a 1-bedroom flat and a 1-bedroom flat here. Again, this flat here would be quite contrived because of that orientation and the size and configuration of the site itself. In addition, to get to the amenity area, the people in this flat would have to walk past windows of this other flat just in here and that amenity area to get to their amenity area. In relation to this flat here, their entrance would come past primary windows of the 5th flat just in here. So it would raise concerns for us in that respect. They would provide for some external amenity with these balconies in this area here, and then they go up to a further floor in this floor here. So if I go back slightly, you can see those 2 further flats up on the 2nd story, and then the flat roof. The design, again, they've tried to deal with the design. It's more interesting than the scheme which was previously dismissed, but it's higher, it's more bulky, it's more dominant on the street scene. So we have concerns there that they haven't satisfactorily addressed that design, that dominant, that cramped concern that the previous inspector had. We also feel that there is some concerns regarding amenity, that they still haven't got to grips with what the inspector was saying there. Then secondly, in terms of that Napoleonic wall, which we understand more now than we did last time, it would, although they pulled the development away from the wall, we still feel it's too close. We still feel it's not making it publicly visible. It's not making the most of that history. And if we want to see some development on the site, we need something which actually respects that wall a little bit better and provides some public information about it. Then the final reason for refusal relates to birds, because as you know, members, they've got to, any development within 6 kilometres of the special protection area have to make a contribution, or required to make a contribution to SAMS. They haven't made that this far. They have, though, indicated that they are willing to pay that money. We just haven't got that agreement as yet. So I think that third reason could be addressed relatively easily. The final point, I would say, relates to car parking. There is no car parking provided in this scheme, and you'll have heard from me that the inspector previously considered that to be a reason to refuse the scheme. Several years on, 12 years on, we've taken the view that this is actually a sustainable site. They have provided the cycle parking, the secure cycle parking, better than the previous scheme. It's very close to facilities. And we don't feel that we could substantiate a highways reason for refusal in relation to car parking. So members, what you're seeing there is a difference between the current scheme and the previous scheme, which was dismissed by on appeal, and we're recommending refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Murray wishes to address the meeting as ward member. Is that agreed?
Thank you very much, members. And I'm pleased to see in the front row, I've got one of my constituents here who's got no interest in any of these applications. He's come along to see what you're all up to. So that's very welcome, and I'm pleased to see him here tonight. I wanted to address the reasons for refusal, if I can, and also to set some context for this scheme. And I'm speaking in favour of the scheme for a number of reasons, which I will explain. First of all, on the bird mitigation, I can absolutely confirm that the applicants, who are the landowners and would be the landlords of this property and continue to live in their house and run their business at Cityway Nursery directly behind it. So obviously they know any impact and have considered that very carefully in the context of the business that they run and their own home. They're perfectly willing to pay the bird mitigation. That does just seem to have been an oversight, and I'm pleased to hear Dave Harris say that that isn't going to be considered as a reason for refusal. I want to set the context. Those of you who may know Delse Road, there's an area from the start of this development that goes up to really the health centre. It's about 0.75 of a kilometre. It's a popular local shopping area. So opposite this site, there are some actually very long established businesses. One of them is a building and DIY business. There's a hairdresser that's been there as long as I can remember. There's a co-op. It's a very well-used shopping area. It's got great bus routes. As I've said, the health centre is there. There's a popular church and parish centre. So this really is a very sustainable urban site and actually a very popular one in terms of living close to Rochester, close to Chatham, close to the station. And I think that far from being a massing sort of unwieldy scheme, this development would in fact present a really good gateway into the Delse shopping area. At the moment, as you saw from the photographs, there's just advertising hoardings and kind of scrubland. You can see the more mature trees behind it, which are in gardens, and they would be retained. And actually, that part of the area at the moment is very scruffy. It doesn't do any justice at all, either to the shopping area or the people who live further along the road up on the banks. So it would provide a modern, much better looking gateway to what is a very important area. In addition to that, along that 0.75 of a kilometre area that I've spoken about, in the last 10 years, the lifetime of these two development attempts, 3 blocks of flats have been built, 2 of them at the top of a road almost opposite this development, with no amenity space at all other than a car park. 1 built onto the back of a shop at the top of Fort Street, an absolutely dreadful development with no amenity space, as far as I can see, no standards at all, and actually has caused myself as a ward councillor and the late Councillor Bowler quite a lot of problems over the years. More recently, adjacent to the health centre, MHS have added 3 stories to an original 2-storey block, building a 5-storey block of 55 flats for over 60s. I was very pleased to see that. It's entirely affordable housing. It's a huge block and actually completely changed the setting that it's in. So I am rather confused with the amount of emphasis that has been put on this development as a massing development, because in the context of the area, actually other developments have been built with much greater massing that have significantly changed the street scene. And all of those developments I've just mentioned are very close either to existing flats or to the small terraces that are described as an open aspect in the papers associated with this application. So I think there's a huge contradiction. I'm turning now to the development itself. It's a modern development. It's a nice-looking development. The internal standards meet or exceed the national standards for living space. It has got amenity. And I'm a little bit surprised to hear you, Dave, say that somebody walking past someone else's window to get to a shared amenity space is a problem. I don't think it would be. I think most people that live in flats have to walk past someone's window to get to an amenity space that is a shared space. There's a private courtyard for some of the flats, there's a shared amenity space, there's a cycleway, there are nice windows, there's the aspect of the trees and looking out onto the street scene.
Councillor Murray, you've had your
I won't
5
be-
minutes.
Yes, okay, I won't be very long. I've got one more part that I particularly wanted to say, and that is the heritage that I do think is important if I can, Chairman.
You've had your 5 minutes.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
would like to just say quickly, please, Chairman, that the heritage element the heritage element of this is not currently visible to anybody. And the new development would actually raise awareness of that heritage
Councillor Murray,
and interpretation. Thank you.
5 minutes is what's has been let members have, and I'm quite strict upon it. Councillor Howcroft-Scott.
Thank you for the insight. Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Murray. I am a little bit troubled and concerned by the hypocrisy, because I know the Dells quite well, because unfortunately I have a season ticket to the surgery there for COVID and all my other steroid and doobries that I need to keep me going. And the other flats are an eyesore, but I'm also troubled and concerned by the lack of parking with this development. And I don't know whether we can ask Chair whether these flats can be rented or sold with a clause in there to say that occupants cannot own vehicles. Because I think the area is overpopulated by vehicles. There's no provision for parking. So if we were to, clear this through planning, whether we could make that kind of call. I am also concerned about the value of the historical loss of the I've got my teeth in, but they're not going to work tonight. The historical wall, let's use that. But if it's more visual with the development in place, surely that's unfair grounds for dismissal. Can those questions be answered, please?
Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
Chairman, thank you very much. Firstly, in relation to car parking, that was something which has caused us a lot of debate in the office, particularly reflecting on the inspectors refusing it on the lack of car parking before. We can't put a condition on which says they can't have any cars. We can't do that. What we can do is put a parking management condition on which says that they can't apply for parking, effectively parking permits. Not all the roads around there are covered by parking permit scheme. So that wouldn't address all the concerns. It's a very balanced issue. If members want to go for refusal and they want to add a car parking concern, that's open to you to do, because, as you say, it's an issue that we debated a lot in the office. I do understand the comment regarding Councillor Murray weighed in very well regarding the wall, and you've raised, Councillor Howcroft-Scott. We're still of the view that there is a better scheme that could come forward here. That wall would still not be visible from public view. It's part of the amenity of this flat and proposal. It's completely obscured by this block here in terms of that part of the wall, so it still won't be publicly visible, and there won't be the historic information for it. There may be a scheme for lesser units that could come forward, which would achieve that. But we're not convinced that this delivers that.
Thank you.
Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly will be supporting the recommendation for refusal. I think this scheme just tries to pack too much into a very small site. But like Mr. Harris, I think it's very likely that a new proposal will come forward, and hopefully the one that will better fit in. What concerns me in the meantime is the walls themselves, because I think it is important that they're part of the historic fabric of Medway, and it's important that they should be preserved. I'm mindful, and a few of us will remember this, not too far away from here was another historic wall, and that got badly damaged in the process of a development. I would not like to see this happen again. So I would like assurance that before another development comes forward, there could be some protection put onto those walls. We were fortunate in the other walls case in that it was bought by people with the means to get it properly repaired, and many of us have actually seen the result of that. So it is also possible, because also within equal distance of this site is the Fort Pitt development, and I remember how well that the developers of that site, the old Mid-Kent College site, incorporated the archaeological remains within their new development, even as going as far as, if I remember rightly, raising up the above the grounds some of the houses, so the foundations wouldn't damage the historical remains below. So it all can be done, and I think this is not the right development for the site. We need to refuse this, wait for something that's better to come along, as I'm sure it will do in very short time, given the high value of land that is developable here within Medway. But just to reiterate, in the meantime, I would like to see officers to, if not tonight, but see what can be done to make sure that nothing untoward, shall we say, happens to those historic artefacts in the meantime. Thank you.
Councillor Lamis.
Thank you, Chair. I can't remember an occasion in the short time I've been a councillor where the opinion of the lead officer and the ward councillor are so paradoxically divergent. So I'm a bit confused as to why that is the case. My question is also retains to these Napoleonic walls. I understand that they're not designated as part of what is currently protected in the area already. My question is, why are they not? How can it be the case that someone can do a private development so close to something that's potentially so historically significant? I'd like to see the council portion that land off and do some kind of conservation work and make it open to public access rather than allowing any kind of development to go on that site. So my question is really, how do we go about as a council better protecting these fantastic historic assets that we have, which are so important to the Napoleonic defensive, which play an integral part to the history of Medway and also what is the foundation, really, of the military culture that is the Medway towns. It's, to me seems, I can't understand how it can just randomly be able to be fall into private hands and be built upon. So I'd like some guidance on that, please. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you. I think Councillor Govan has made a point about the need to protect the wall, and one we'll be talking to Historic England and to KCC Archaeology, following up their comments on that. In relation to Councillor Lamis's point, I think over the last 12 years, we now understand more about the fortifications of the area. As time goes on, you learn more about the history and the walls and so on. And if you look back at the 2011 application, you can see there wasn't a reason for refusal then, because we didn't fully understand the importance of the wall. We do know more about the importance of it now through work that's been undertaken by KC Archaeology, by Heritage England, by my own conservation officers. And I think it's a matter moving forward of following Councillor Colvin's comments, and also then liaising with the applicants in terms of what possibly could come forward on the site. And just finally, Chairman, if it's okay, what I would say here is I don't think that Councillor Murray and myself are that divergent on it. We have a different view on something, but then 12 years ago, members of this committee had a different view for the officers there. I think it's a balanced one. We've reflected the comments of an inspector. We don't feel that they've been satisfactorily addressed. Councillor Murray's come to a different view, and I respect that view.
Yes, so that it has come before, was it 12 years ago, and I was here, Mr. Harris was here. I don't think Adrian was on the committee, can't recall. But we had a frank discussion. It was down for approval, and the committee went for refusal, and it was supported by the inspector for the reasons that we felt the historic wall was important. But lots of ancient wall in our area is actually in private ownership, and the Tudor wall that Councillor Galvin spoke about was in private ownership, and somebody thought it was a good idea to knock it down, and they had to rebuild it. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the Ward Councillor for a presentation as well. All planning applications are a balancing exercise, and I'd like to thank the officers for the report. I think it sums up quite well in terms of the how they weight the benefits and how they weight the harm. Substantial weight is attributed to the harm, and modest weight is attributed to the benefits, which is why obviously we've come to the recommendation for refusal. The benefits being 8 houses. Now, there's a local plan consultation at the moment for 38-ish thousand dwellings which are being promoted by developers. So I think that need can be met anywhere, pretty much in the Medway towns. So that's how I would deal with the benefit of the dwellings. In terms of the harm, I do agree with the weighting on the harm. This is part of our history as a borough. And we need to make sure that it's appreciated and it can be seen, it can be interpreted with information boards, and it can all form part of a heritage overview of the area. So I will be supporting the recommendation. And I do think it's also important to reiterate that there is history with this site, with the appeal as well. So I think that needs to be put onto the scales, which it has done, which also boosts the recommendation, in my opinion, for refusal. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Excuse me, Chair. I really would like some advice on this one because of the divergence between the Chief Planning Officer's comments about the special protection areas and the contribution, and what the ward councillor has said about the special protection areas contribution. And because of the issue about incorporating the wall, I did wonder what your advice would be, Chair, added to by the professional advice of the officer, as to whether a deferral rather than an outright refusal might be more sensible in this case.
My view is not for refusal to defer. It's quite clear from the presentation and the papers what the issue is. If you even had a site visit, you wouldn't learn anything additional. We did have a site visit last time round, if I remember correctly, 12 years ago. It didn't give us any more information. All you see is what you see on Google Maps and on the map, photographs, 4 holdings. So no, I don't think deferral is a good idea. I think we need to go to a decision.
Chairman, sorry, just to add to that, because I 100% agree with what the Chairman's saying. I don't think there's any point in a deferral. Members need to make a decision on this. I think I'm clear, and the report's clear in relation to the wall and what we consider to be the harm. Councillor Murray has put her contrary view to that, and you need to take a view on that. In relation to the birds, at this moment, we have to go for a refusal on the birds because there is no agreement, no legal agreement to make that payment. If you agree the refusal and they go to appeal, by the time we get to appeal, there could be a Section 106 agreement which addresses that issue. And we would then step back from that reason for refusal, but still leave the other 2 if members determine to refuse it. Hopefully that's clear, Councillor Jones.
Any other member? Okay, I'll go to the Vice Chair to move the proposal as on the agenda paper.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendation for refusal as laid out in the main papers.
Seconded, Chair.
So those in favour of the proposal as moved?
That's 14, Chairman.
Those against?
That's 1, Chairman.
Thank you. So the planning application for the rear of 1822 City Way, which is on the Dells, has been refused. And thank you, Councillor Murray, for attending. Let's move on to item 7. And Amy Charolot is going to speak. She's the first time at a planning meeting, so be kind to her.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for 22 Sunnymead Avenue, located in Gillingham. It is a retrospective application for the conversion of the existing dwelling house in a C3 use to a care home falling within the C2 use. This is the application site outlined in red. As you can see, it's located within a residential street of mainly terrace properties, with Priestfield Stadium located to the rear of the application site. Apologise, my throat's a little bit sore. Here shows an aerial view of the site outlined in red. As you can see, this also outlines the rear garden. Yeah, of course. Sorry, is that better? Here are some photos of the front of the property. This clearly shows the parking area that is proposed to be retained. Here. These photos just outline that there is on-street parking and the availability of that located on the street. The application is retrospective, so shown here are the existing floor plans and the proposed floor plans, and this shows there are no changes internally or externally to the main property. There is a living area on the ground floor and then 3 bedrooms located on the first floor level. This is to support the child and the carers when they are staying at the property. The use is proposed to support 1 child between the ages of 8 to 17 years of age, and it's proposed for a maximum of 3 carers present at the property on one time, although this will be dependent on the needs of the child, so this could be less. I have received comments from our Children's Commissioning Service. They do not have any objections to the use, subject to a condition restricting that only 1 occupant will be present in the property. We have considered that the use would not cause any detrimental impact to the neighbouring amenity, as it is only proposed for 1 child and a maximum of 3 carers. As such, I have recommended the application for approval, subject to the conditions as set out. Thank you.
Thank you. We have heard that maybe there's more than 1 child at this premises, but this is simply for 1 person, 1 child, and if they have more than 1, then that is subject to enforcement action. Any member? Councillor Brown.
My question is actually, there are no proposals to the floor plans, but are there proposals for this house to be upgraded to the conditions you would have on a C2 property, which would be fire doors correctly fitted and certified, fire breaks in the areas where there appears to be some open on the ground floor. It looks like that's very open plan, and fire risk seems to be a problem with this, given that this is going to be a C2 application, and I accept that at the moment they're asking for it to have a restriction of 1 child only in it. But if we change it to C2, there's nothing to stop them coming back and actually lifting that. And if this isn't a safe house in terms of its fabric, then I worry, because it is in a highly densely populated area.
Mr. Hatch, want to make a comment?
Sorry, Chairman, thank you very much. I mean, two things. First, in terms of that internal layout and fire doors and so on, that's not something we would cover under planning. That would be for the whoever's licensing or registering it to deal with that. Our control would, as Amy has said, our control would be through that condition which limits them to one resident care forward on there. If they want to change that, they would need to come back to this planning authority for that to be lifted, and we would need to consider the issues that you say, Councillor Brown, at that time.
So you're telling me that the number of occupants is what will determine whether the house is safe or not? I know they'll have a fire risk assessment done, possibly, hopefully.
Chairman, what I'm saying is that we control that there's the number of children there, so there'll be no more than one child there. That condition is there. If they want to increase that number, they would need to come back to this authority to change that condition, and we would assess that application at that time. It wouldn't be automatically lifted. We would assess that at that stage. What I'm saying is that internal layout and the fire and so on, that would be addressed under separate legislation, which would be for the whoever registers it, be it Ofsted or our authority, or Children's Authority.
Thank you.
Members?
Thank you, Chair. As far as I'm concerned, if you're a foster carer, you don't have to make these changes and come to a planning committee. I mean, the only difference to me between this and a foster placement is that the carer doesn't live in, they have staff that come and go. And the existing arrangements in terms of the layout of the building is identical to what's gone before. There are conditions on the number of kids, as you outlined. So I'm fairly minded to support this application on that basis, that really it's just muchness, really. I think it's quite a sensible scheme. Thank you.
Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Chair. I very much welcome this, given the severe shortage that we have here in Medway and indeed across the whole country of places for children, particularly because one can infer from the staffing levels that the child concerned must have quite a few challenges to warrant that level of staffing. And also that perhaps gives us a clue as to why our children's social services are having to pay out so much money to provide placements for children with challenges. So I welcome this. We need more of these in Medway. We don't need to put obstacles in their way. I think we need to encourage these because there is a great need in our community for these sorts of facilities, and I'm pleased that we are seeing these. We've had a number of them now, and I personally am very pleased to see them because they are needed.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. To be honest to the committee, I know more about this subject now than I did previously, so I'm happy to support the recommendation. We do need these places, and it does need to add to the provision to meet that need. Thank you.
Councillor Housecroft-Scott.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Councillor Brown has mentioned the reasons why I will be voting against this. I know it's been recommended to us, but since May, there's been a variety of houses that we've lost to our communities and I know maybe there are children in care, and maybe we can hold the conditions for approval and take some action. But I'm really troubled and concerned about a cottage industry developing in Medway. And, you know, I'm very well aware that there is a need, but I think we are going to be flooded on the market with this because we are cheaper than most London boroughs to buy properties. And then obviously we need to think about the amenities in terms of the child, if they're being placed, for instance, from Greenwich, they'll be in this dwelling. Hopefully it's just one child until they're 18, and then that child has no right to stay in Medway, yet they will hopefully have been here for a while, and they will have to then up en route and move back to the area where they came from. And it's like treating our children in care like parcel children, and I think it's unacceptable. So I will be voting against this.
Thank you. We've had quite a few of these recently, and it's one of the things that has changed, that our children's commissioning team are making comments, and they have made comment upon, was that page 4, I think? And it is simply, those are change use, it's moving a dwelling as a dwelling, basically. So there's no change of use as such. But I'm going to go to the Vice Chair, and then I will do my normal spiel afterwards about what we have done. Vice Chair.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I move the recommendation to approve the application subject to conditions 1 to 3 as laid out in the main papers.
Seconded, Chair.
Those in favour of the proposal as moved?
That's 9, Chair.
Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6, Chair.
So that's less. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. So before I finish, for the record, this approval is only in planning terms. The Planning Committee has not given permission for a children's care home. That permission is granted by Ofsted, working with the Children's Services Department of the local authority whose children will be living there, which may not be Medway Council. And I request on behalf of the committee that the concerns raised by residents and others be made available to Ofsted. Having said that, the planning application for 22 Sunnymead Avenue, Gillingham, has been approved. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Move to item 8, which is 1 Gladstone Road, Chatham, and Chanel Farrant-Smith is going to present.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a 3-bedroom detached property rear of 1 Gladstone Road with alterations to 1 Gladstone Road, comprising of removal of windows to rear of the property and relocating them to side elevations. This is the location plan. The site plan demonstrates the layout of 1 Gladstone Road and the double garage to rear, which is to be demolished to facilitate the construction of the new dwelling. The new dwelling would front Pembroke Road, which is sited rear of Maidstone Road, Chatham, and opposite King Edward Road. Going on to the site photographs, from left to right, this is the proposal site here with the existing double garage. The second and third images demonstrate the relationship of 1 Gladstone Road, and the fourth image demonstrates the relationship of number 3 Gladstone Road. The existing floor plans. Number 1 Gladstone Road is a 5-bedroom detached property arranged as lounge, dining room, 1 bedroom and bathroom and kitchen at ground floor, 4 bedrooms and 1 bathroom at first floor. The existing garage and associated hard standing serves as parking for that property, which can facilitate up to 4 cars. These are the existing elevations. 1 Gladstone Road seeks to remove on the bottom left elevation, you'll see that the proposal seeks to remove windows. That includes the bay window and the 2 windows at first floor, but the window at ground floor on the left is to remain. Going on to the proposed floor plans, this demonstrates the arrangement of the 3-bedroom property with cycle and bin storage to front and amenity area to rear. The dwelling is arranged over 3 stories with living room, shower room and open plan kitchen diner at ground floor, 2 bedrooms, a study and family room at first floor, and a master bedroom with ensuite at second floor within the roof space. The proposed elevations, demonstrating the design of the property, which includes a dormer window to front, slightly under the ridge of the dwelling, and it has bay windows at ground floor and first floor. Going on to the 3D illustrations, this gives a good understanding of the proposed new dwelling and the relocated windows of 1 Gladstone Road, which are on the side elevations, as you can see. They also demonstrate the relationship between the proposal and the neighbouring boundaries. Going on to the final slide, which is the proposed site plan showing the location of the dwelling within the plots. In terms of the principle of the development, whilst the proposal is within an urban area and policy H4 permits redevelopment of existing residential areas by infilling, the proposal would also be defined as backland development, which is only permitted where there is no impact on neighbouring amenity, where adequate amenity space is provided for existing and future occupants, and sufficient vehicular access is provided, and where the character of the area is maintained. In this case, in terms of occupant and neighbouring amenity, whilst the dwelling itself would meet with national housing standards, in terms of internal floor space, the amenity space for the new dwelling would measure approximately 3.8 metres in depth, which is below Medway housing standards, which allows for a minimum of 7 metres within constrained sites. In terms of neighbouring amenity, the location of the proposed dwelling, together with the relocated windows at 1 Gladstone Road, would result in a significant increase in overlooking into the private garden and windows of number 3 Gladstone Road. In addition to this, the proximity of the new dwelling to the rear boundary wall would also result in an overbearing development, which would further impact on neighbouring amenity of number 3. As such, it is considered the proposal would have a detrimental impact on both occupant and neighbouring amenity. The proposal also raises concerns in relation to parking provisions. The existing garage provides parking for up to 4 cars, which will be lost to facilitate the new dwelling. In addition to this, the proposed dwelling would not provide any parking provisions, resulting in development that would rely solely on on-street parking. The current on-street parking arrangements within Pembroke Road are of great demand, with cars often parked on the curbs on both sides of the road. Medway parking standards state that a dwelling of 3 bedrooms should provide a minimum of 2 off-road parking spaces, and whilst it is acknowledged that the proposal site is within an urban area, it is not within a town centre location. Therefore, it cannot be guaranteed that the occupants of the 3-bedroom dwelling would not rely on private cars. As such, it is considered that the lack of parking provisions for the new dwelling, together with the loss of the 4 parking spaces currently on site, would result in an unacceptable level of pressure being placed on on-street parking provisions. Lastly, in relation to the design of the dwelling, it appears as a 3-storey property from the front elevation due to its height and the large dormer window that serves the master bedroom within the roof space. This is out of character with Pembroke Road, which compromises of 2-storey terrace and semi-detached properties. It is noted that there is 1 front dormer within the immediate area, which is located at 2 Gladstone Road, adjacent to 1 Gladstone Road. However, this dormer is of smaller scale and is aligned with windows below and therefore is less obtrusive. The dormer on the proposed dwelling would not align with the windows at ground floor or first floor, resulting in a contrived design. Additionally, the siting of the new dwelling within the plot would be hard up against both boundaries. This, together with the lack of amenity space for occupants to rear, demonstrates an overdevelopment of the site. To conclude, the principle of the development is unacceptable, together with the cramped and contrived design of the proposal, the impact on occupant amenity, neighbouring amenity, highways and parking provisions. As such, the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. And on the supplementary agenda advice, we have further representations, 2 letters objection and 1 of support. Any member? Councillor Croft-Scott.
Thank you. That was a great presentation and very well executed. I really appreciate that. I know the area very well. We led a successful campaign there and got 3 gorgeous councillors out of it. And I have to say, parking is premier. I've not seen such bad parking in Medway around there, apart from round Priestfields and maybe in Valencia and Italy, places like that. That's how bad it is. So on those grounds, and also the grounds of the largeness of the dormer and the blocking out of light and replacing windows, I cannot I'm not in favour of this, and I think it's severe overdevelopment in an area that's already at capacity. So thank you.
Councillor Lemmers.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be supporting it for all the reasons outlined in the report. My question is, what are the nature of the letters of support that have been received? Because in my experience with a residential property like this, it's rare to get so many letters of support. So I would like to know the nature of those letters of support, please.
To summarise the letters of support, they mainly surround supporting the economy, so providing an additional dwelling, and also they state that the parking provisions would be acceptable within the area. That's essentially what the support letters say.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be supporting the recommendation for refusal, but just a comment to say that there are 4 quite solid reasons for refusal, which I think is interesting. Usually there's 2 or 3. There's 4 big chunky ones there. So, and I know that officers would only put in a reason for refusal if it could be defended at appeal. So there's 4 areas which will stack up against this application. So for that reason, I'll be supporting the recommendation. Thank you.
Any other member? If not, I'll go to the Vice Chair to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendation for refusal as set out in the main papers.
Seconded, Chair.
Okay, those in favour of the proposal as moved?
That's 16, Chairman.
That's all of us. So the application for 1 Gladstone Road, Chatham, has been refused, and that is the end of the meeting. Can I thank all those who have attended? Until the next time.